I'm sorry, Mom. I was always told I was good. I have an awesome family that loves me so much, and I was thrilled it was getting even bigger. A new sister was going to be added to the family. Once I was told of my new duties, I made sure to help Mom around the house more, just being there anytime I could be of assistance, like picking up things she dropped. I know that pregnancy can make people funny and lash out when they don't mean it, so I just kept my head down when the anger was thrown my way. Dad tried to comfort me whenever it happened. He always seemed to get more and more upset every time they spoke about me. They tried to close the door so I wouldn't come in, but I would hear my name come up and all the ways I was a problem. Mom suddenly had a lot of grievances against me. I always tried to be good. I just mess up a little, like getting underfoot when playing jumping on the couch when I was excited, or breaking a toy. Then, I accidentally tripped Mom. She fell and started crying, holding her stomach where my sister was. I tried to apologize, but I was met with anger I'd never seen from her before. Dad wasn't home and I tried to run away as she yelled at me. She caught me though. I thought I would get a normal time out without dinner like the last few times, but instead, she dragged me outside and to the car. I was crying. I didn't know where she was taking me. Eventually, she took me to a strange building. She spoke to someone there and suddenly a man came out and grabbed me. I tried my best to cry for Mom to save me, that I was sorry. I struggled to get free and run into her arms, but it was too late. She walked away. She didn't even turn back to look at me. All I could do was sit on the floor and cry. Eventually, I looked at the stranger. He had a sad expression as he led me away. I'm sorry, I'm sure you're a good girl, the man tried to comfort me. Some people just can't handle dogs once a child comes around. I hope you find a new family before the week is up. Space is limited. I resigned myself to my new home as the man locked the cage door behind me. Maybe my next family will love me.
I refuse to believe my brother would kill himself. Can I ask you two something? I said to my father and mother, who looked at each other across the dinner table. What is it, champ? It's about Michael. My father teared up a bit. He was always more sensitive than my mother. Oh honey, my mother said, is everything okay, eh? Why'd he do it? I was the one who found my older brother. It happened 1 week ago today. All I remember was going into the bathroom and seeing blood. So much blood. He seemed happy whenever I hung out with him. My mother walked over and hugged me. Sometimes the people who seem the happiest are the saddest on the inside. His girlfriend just broke up with him, too. Ooh. My father said, wiping his tears. A broken heart can drive a man crazy. I refused to believe it. I got up from the dinner table and went to bed so I didn't have to think about Michael. I woke up in the middle of the night when I felt something wet on my feet. I grabbed my phone, looked under the covers, and turned on the flashlight. There was blood. So much blood. Brother. A voice faintly spoke. I slowly lowered the covers, hands trembling, and my brother was at the end of my bed. His skin was chalky and the color had left his eyes, but it was him. His wrists were still bleeding. I was murdered. He wheezed. Murdered? I could barely speak. I was terrified. Avenge me. He slowly disappeared, fading away like smoke. I immediately took my bloody sheets to the washer. Of course he was murdered. It made so much sense. While my sheets were washing, I took a shower and tried to figure out who could have done this. Then it hit me. His girlfriend just broke up with him. I vowed to get that bitch just like she did my brother. Make it look like a suicide, and get away scot-free. 3 days later I did exactly that. I made it safely home and was feeling euphoric. I had avenged my brother. I was walking to my room when my parents called for me from the living room. Hey, I said nervously, what's up? Surely they didn't know what I just did. How could they? "There's something we need to tell you about your brother," my father said. I swallowed hard. "What?" "Well," my mother said, "we decided we should tell you why he killed himself. Son, your brother saw things. Saw people who weren't there. Apparently, it runs in the family. The older he got, the worse it got for him, and eventually he couldn't take it anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because one day you might start seeing things, too. Seeing people that aren't there. Telling you horrible things, lying to you. If that ever happens, you need to tell us immediately, okay?" I stared blankly. "Honey, you haven't seen anything like that, have you?"
I'm starting to regret becoming an artist's model. It began a few nights ago. I was sitting motionless when the instructor's voice cut through the sound of pencils on paper. "I've told you before, do not approach the model." I needed to stay perfectly still, which meant I couldn't turn around to see who she was talking to. Eventually, she told the class she needed to step outside for a moment. Seconds later, I saw a shadow cast from over my shoulder, someone standing behind me. They came so close that I could feel their breath on my neck. I felt incredibly exposed, especially since I couldn't turn to look at them. I was immensely grateful that we were in a room filled with other people. The feel of something cold on my bare skin made me gasp. It was followed by a familiar sound, measuring tape. He leaned in, whispered into my ear, "Your bones are exquisite." The rest of the class murmured around us. It was my first time modeling for this class. The prior models never returned, but we all knew they weren't supposed to touch me. Just as he began to speak again, someone came to my rescue, pulling him away. When the instructor returned, she kicked him out immediately. I was worried he'd cause a scene, but he left without a word. It was only after I heard his steps grow distant and locker open and eventually close down the hall that I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I thought that'd be the end of it. When packing up afterwards, though, I noticed items in my locker were in disarray. One shoe was missing, my phone was shoved in a different pocket of my purse, and my wallet lay open. That night, the texts began. "You inspired me today, Jade." I didn't recognize the phone number, but they clearly knew me. "You're perfect for my project. Together, we're going to create something beautiful." I tried reverse lookup, but it was a virtual number beyond my skill level to track down. It was the creep from art class. I could feel it. The graceful curve of spine and ribs under flesh contrasted against the sharpness of the shoulders. Incredible. I realized he'd likely looked through my wallet at my driver's license. I never even saw his face. I could pass him on the street and never realize it. I look forward to beginning our work together. I decided to stay with a friend. I only left her place once to grab groceries, but as I walked back into her apartment, my phone pinged. "You looked lovely today, Jade." We went to the police, but the name he'd given to the art program is fake. After a day of blissful silence, I hoped he'd moved on. Until he texted again last night. "You really do have such beautiful bones." I hope they find him soon, because I woke up to another text this morning. I can't wait to hold them in my hands. I care, an endless labyrinth of despair. You can leave anytime you want. Or that's what you tell yourself so you won't drop to your knees and break down sobbing in the middle of the aisle. That would be the end of you. You've got to keep moving, that much you do know, you've learned it. Otherwise, the staff begin to drift towards you, drawn to you as if an unwritten rule has been broken. When you stay still, you belong to them. You just pray that you don't collapse from exhaustion soon. You've witnessed what happened to the couple that had walked in with you. They were so tired they muttered. They just needed to sit for a moment, rest their eyes. You think they knew the staff were coming for them. but were too far gone to do anything about it. Maybe they didn't even care anymore. Now, every time you pass the sofa section, you see the blood-stained fabric of that frost loaf, and you think of them. You have to stop eventually, the staff know it. You walk the showroom, trying to shuffle slowly enough to conserve your strength, but not so much to attract their watchful, hungry eyes. The worst part is that as you continue on your seemingly endless circle, you can see the exit just beyond the lamp section. Each time you pass it, you try to pull yourself away from the others to reach those automated doors. But there is always something that stops you from leaving. Sometimes it's the warm glow of a magnet that draws you in, leaving you powerless to escape it. Other times you find yourself staring, open-mouthed, at the hive-like openings of the endless calyxes stacked upon each other, of which the staff lively move in and out. You see other people walk in and join the circular path, but they can stop to stare, measure, even sit down, and the staff ignore them. You've grown to hate them because they can do something you never will. Leave. You rack your brain, where did you go wrong? Why are they free to go, but not you? Were you simply unlucky? Was it the meatballs? You're getting tired now. It's been days. You aren't even sure how many. You loop past the sofas again, the massive, rust-colored stain on the frost loaf taunts you. You wonder how many more times you'll be able to pass it until you no longer have the energy to do so. Another person gave up yesterday. She simply sank into the soft mattress of a brims and pulled the covers over her head, perhaps so she couldn't see them coming. Maybe she was onto something. You're moving so slowly now that the staff begin trailing you, just a few steps behind. Aware it's almost time, as if they can taste weakness in the air. You see the frost loaf once more. This time you can sense that it'll be your last. Maybe you will sit and rest for a moment, after all.
I've been secretly investigating people to try figure out who killed my mom. The police said it was an accident, but I'm not so sure. The way she was found was strange to say the least. Why would a 64-year-old woman with a bad knee and arthritis be doing climbing a tree? I often had to help her climb the steps to the front door, and that's only 3 steps. They said the cat got stuck up the tree again and she went up after him. I know she cared more about that cat than any of us, but I couldn't see her climbing a tree. She often got dizzy wearing high heels. There is only 3 people that could have done it, me included, and I'm fairly sure it wasn't me, so that leaves Tom and Jimmy. Both of which could have thrown Ma'am off the roof and dragged her carcass down the field to make it seem like an accident. They really hated her, not that they didn't have their reasons. She wasn't what you would call a nurturing mother. For instance, one time Jimmy begged her to talk to Tom about bullying him, which at one point got so bad, Jimmy stopped talking completely for almost 3 months because he was sick of Tom making fun of his speech problem. She wouldn't even answer him, she just laughed and sent him to bed. Tom probably had it the worst though. He was way too loud for her to ignore, so she used to lock him in the closet with a sock in his mouth anytime he annoyed her, which was a lot. I probably had it the best. She was nice to me and often took me to the park or beach like a normal child, but that was only when Tom and Jimmy weren't around. Tom was my first suspect. He came out just after me that day and he was complaining about how Mom had threatened to get him taken away if he didn't stop talking shit. But he genuinely looked upset when he found out she died. Plus, he said Jimmy came out just after him, and he was acting really weird. He told Mom to go F herself when she asked him to make a cup of tea. I'm not so sure it was Jimmy either. I was talking to him just before I found her, and he seemed relaxed, which I imagine you wouldn't be if you were just after murdering someone. Plus, he seemed confused when I asked him about telling Ma'am to go F herself. It's so frustrating. I just know it was one of us. I found blood on our left hand and scratch marks on our neck from the cat, but no one seems to remember where they came from. Unless, there is another one in here that hasn't shown themselves yet. Jesus, I hope not. I barely get a word out as it is. I think I'm losing my head. I was driving home after a long day at work. I blinked, and the next thing I knew, I was at home having dinner with my wife and 2 daughters. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked me. "I don't know. I just feel like I've forgotten something," I replied, confused. Forgot something? It was much worse than that. I had no memory of going home. I reassured her and spent the rest of the evening as normal, rewatching one of my favorite movies. Eventually, I dozed off in front of the sofa. I dreamt strange things. I saw myself at the age of 11, having a picnic with my parents. Except they weren't smiling and happy like I remembered them. Instead, they were sitting on the picnic blanket, staring into space, their faces closed and expressionless. No matter how much I shouted at them in my dream, I couldn't see any life left in them. It was as if they were there, without being there. I woke up in my bed, alone. I looked all over the house, but not only was my wife gone, so were my children. My cell phone line was dead, no service. I went outside to get my car and drive to work, thinking I'd try to call my wife a little later. There was no one on the road but me. It was as if the whole earth had emptied out. I dismissed my amnesia last night, but I was seriously beginning to wonder if I was losing my mind. I was lost. I decided to go to my work to see if anyone was still in town, if a national evacuation drill was underway and could explain everything. Once there, I rushed back into the building, hoping to find someone who could explain what was going on. And when I opened the door, I was relieved to see that all my colleagues were there. At last, I could find out what was going on. I walked over to David, a colleague who over the years had become my best friend. "Hey David, what's going on? My family's disappeared and there's nobody left in town," I asked him. He didn't answer. "David?" I insisted. I stepped forward to face him, and discovered to my horror that his face and expression were exactly the same as my parents in my dream. It couldn't be. Was I trapped in a nightmare? I tried to talk to everyone, but they were all in the same state. My head hurt, my eyes hurt. I saw lights, and sounds filled my ears even though there was nothing there. Nothing alive. My vision began to narrow. Sounds began to blend together. Blackness. Emptiness. And finally, words I didn't have time to understand came to me for the last time. "My God, the other driver is dead for sure, his head was torn off by the impact."
I took part in the murder of a famous band nobody remembers. It was called the Lost and Found Ritual. I was selfish. We were alone at Christmas. Mom and Dad were dead after a freak accident. There was no food, no hot water or electricity, and CPS were days from taking our little sister. My brother's new friends said they would take care of everything. We just had to make a wish. I wished for our house. Rowan wished for Mom and Dad. Poppy wished for snow and bunny rabbits. Eternity Light, the biggest band in the world, was our target. Made up of 5 members from Korea, Thailand, Australia, and America, their debut in the West had taken the world by storm with their pop/rock songs that stuck in your head for days. I had one job, and that was tricking them into getting into our car. Getting into the venue was easy enough. The people helping us were definitely the band's rivals, and had the connections to turn suspicion away from me, a 17-year-old security guard. "Yo, aren't you a little young to be working security?" Ty, the face of the band, was standing in front of me, swaying a little. The girl working behind the bar had slipped a sedative into his drink for $4,000. Handsome, with a battered pair of Ray-Bans pinning unruly curls to his head, a popped shirt collar showing too much chest, and a slightly unhinged smile with the tinge of a Boston accent, the lead singer of Eternity Light was nicer than I thought. "Don't go soft," Rowan hissed in my earpiece. "We've got the others." Ty is a slippery one. "Do it." So, I did. I dragged the man out of the back entrance, shoving him into the awaiting car. Rowan drove us into the middle of nowhere, and following his friend's instructions, tied all 5 members to a tree. Rowan told Poppy to close her eyes and cover her ears. Ruby and Yuri, the girls, screamed, while the guys were quieter. When I held my breath, pressing the blade of my knife to Ty's throat, his eyes found mine, and he smiled. Spiteful, spitting blood when I punctured his heart. His blood was my mom and dad. That's what I told myself. I know you're there, he slurred, head lolled, flickering eye scanning the dark behind me. Is this because we stole your stupid song? When his body went limp, something cold grazed my face. I looked up, snowflakes dancing in my eyes. Something furry brushed my ankle, Poppy squealing with delight. Bunny rabbits. The band was gone, no traces, not even their blood on my hands. My phone vibrated. Mom. Hey, where are you? Dinner is cold. Rowan caught my eye, smiling. We went home. Back to our old house, strung with Christmas lights. I hugged my mom, ignoring the slimy consistency of her skin. The stitches holding her and Dad together. There was a band on the radio. Calypso. They're taking the world by storm.
Mouse coffin. I once made a mouse coffin. From pine and stainless screws. I had cut the pieces perfectly in spite of all the booze. The design just took a minute, but the sanding took 3 hours. I made a bed from cotton balls. And a pillow made from flowers. The final touch was special. Adding a sliding door to see. So I can peek just one more time, before he's gone from me. I put my mouse inside. I sipped my beer inside. I walked down to the maple tree. Where I stumbled down and cried. I dug a hole that was 3 feet deep, a perfect place for eternal sleep. I told him what he had meant to me. And then I said a prayer. I covered him up. And I grabbed my beer. I went back home. To shed in tears. I knew quite well, and felt assured, that he was safe inside that coffin. The worms could not get through to him. The snakes could not make a meal of him. I'll be sure the dogs won't uncover him. Because I'll visit him quite often. But as 3 months passed, I found myself just thinking while I was drinking about the mouse under the maple tree. The mouse that had been good to me. The mouse who was a friend to me. Through good times and the bad. I remembered how he'd cheered me up. As I slammed some whiskey back. It was then, just then. I paused and stared. I sat straight up in my rocking chair. I was out of whiskey, so I grabbed a beer. And I thought. And I thought. But my thoughts weren't clear. I sipped on my beer as I thought aloud. There was something wrong. Overlooked somehow. There was something that just did not feel right, at all. Something. About that night. About the mouse. And the burial. I thought. And I thought, while I sipped on my drink, then I leaped from my porch, tripping over my feet. I followed the trail to the maple tree. Where I stared at the gravesite. And kicked at the leaves. It was then when the thought came over me. As I glanced at the beer in front of me. When I made the mouse coffin. I had placed my mouse in. To see if the size was the size that would fit him. But thinking back now, my mouse was alive. And I'd forgot. That's it. I forgot. Oh my. I forgot to wait until he died. Before sealing his body up inside. So I drank and drank and drank some more, and then I cried and cried.
My dad gave away my custom-made birthday cake to my twin sister. My twin sister always got whatever she wanted. Her name was Allison, and she loved causing trouble and blaming me for it. One time, she saw Mom made this big lasagna, and left it in a glass dish on the counter to cool down. Allison hated lasagna, so she knocked the dish to the floor, shattering it into a million pieces. Then she ran and told Dad I did it. Dad dragged me into my room by the arm, which felt like it was gonna rip out of the socket. We learned about sockets at school. Allison told him to take away my Pikachu toy because that was my favorite Pokemon, even though it's not. I just told her it was because I knew she'd tell Dad to take it away all the time. I was crying before Mom came into my room. I told her I would never break the dish, and I knew she spent a lot of time making the lasagna. She hugged me tight and said she knew. Mom knows about all the things I like and don't like, and I liked her cooking. Mom never argued with Dad because when she did, he'd yell so loud the walls shook, and she couldn't ever punish Allison because that made Dad really mad. I hated living with Dad and Allison. I even told Mom for my birthday present I wanted it to be just me and her. On my birthday, Mom baked 2 cakes to celebrate. Allison got a vanilla 5 Nights and Freddy's one, which was her favorite game, but Mom made me a lemon Pikachu one. I got upset because I thought she knew that wasn't really my favorite Pokemon, and I hated lemon, but I didn't say anything because I knew she worked really hard making it. Mom said I wasn't allowed any of Allison's cake, and she wasn't allowed any of mine. Allison complained to Dad, who said she could eat whatever she liked. Allison stuffed her mouth with a piece of my cake, and when Mom tried stopping her, Dad pushed her onto the floor. He ate a piece himself and laughed at her with all this yellow frosting flying from his mouth. Allison started making these coughing sounds. Dad went to help, but then he fell to his knees and held his throat. His face got even redder than when he yelled at Mom. Mom pulled a secret Charizard, my favorite Pokemon, cake out of the fridge and carried it over to me. She said that one was chocolate orange, my favorite flavor, and she only made the lemon one because she knew Allison and Dad would want it. They were both rolling on the floor now. Mom led me outside by the hand and asked if I wanted to go on a special birthday trip without Dad or Allison. I asked where we were going, and she said it didn't matter. The important thing is that we were never coming back.
My girlfriend told me I'm not her type and I've never been so relieved. My mom's childhood bestie, Sharon, popped into the clinic while I was there giving blood. "Is that Ryan? Look how big he's getting," she said. Mom pointed at the tube in my arm, boasting about how I was a universal donor, the only interesting thing about me. Then, she invited Sharon over for dinner. Later, when I answered the door, I froze. Because Sharon brought her daughter, Ashley. Ashley had curly dark hair and pretty brown eyes. I was too nervous to speak until Mom shouted, "Don't just stand there, invite them in already." While we ate, Mom said Ashley should let me show her around town since she was new here. "I'd like that," she said, scraping all the peppers and garlic and onion off her chicken cutlets. In coastal towns gossiping is a national sport, so I knew she'd figure out what a giant loser I was eventually. A rumor circulated at school that a pale babe with a fat ass moved here, but luckily for me, she turned out to be harder to spot around town than Bigfoot. I mostly took Ashley on late night walks, so there'd be less danger of us being noticed. She didn't speak much, but I knew she listened because she asked meaningful questions. After a few weeks, I mustered up the courage to take her to the most romantic spot I could think of, the beach. Swallowing a lump, I laced my hand with hers and then we faced each other. We leaned into each other, slowly, and just before our lips connected, I heard a voice. It was my bully, Johnny Patterson. He came rushing towards us yelling insults the entire time. Quickly, I confessed to Ashley I was social poison, that she might still have been able to salvage her reputation by saying we didn't know each other. She laughed and said she liked me too much to do that. Filled with courage, I squared up to Johnny, who caught me with a knee to the groin. From the sand, I watched him throw an arm over Ashley's shoulder, telling her she was too hot to hang out with a loser like me. The corners of Ashley's mouth curled up, revealing 2 huge fangs. Before Johnny could react, those sharp teeth clamped shut around his throat, and within seconds his body got drained of every nutritious element. Ashley tossed his withered husk into the water and then looked down at me, her face beautiful despite all the blood. She told me I didn't need to be afraid because I wasn't her type. Specifically, her blood type. According to her, O-negative, universal donor, tasted like sun-baked mayonnaise studded with cheese and diarrhea. She said she wanted us to be boyfriend-girlfriend, but would understand if I said no, and that she'd give me time to think about it. So I'm still sitting here at the beach, confused, terrified, and weirdly, excited. And now I need help figuring out what to do next.
My husband's wandering eye. My husband has always had a history of staring at other women, but it wasn't always this bad. He gawks at women every chance he gets now. What infuriates me the most is the fact that he knows about my jealous tendencies. He knows not to poke the bear. But that doesn't seem to matter anymore. He seems to have forgotten about our many drunken nights that ended in screaming fights when I would accuse him of checking out other women. Or even worse, perhaps he just didn't care anymore. All I did was look in her direction. He would plead. He insisted that I was just looking to pick a fight, but I knew better. I know what men are really after. Fortunately for me, my husband started wisening up after we got married. I would catch side glances from him every now and then, but all it took was one long rant to whip him back into shape. Until just recently. I've never seen him stare so openly before. Tonight is no different. I sit across from him at the table and watch his head turn left and right all night. He doesn't say a word. Suddenly, he gets out of his seat and walks toward the woman he's been eyeing the most this whole time. This is the first time he's actually approached someone, and I can feel my blood boil. I get out of my chair and run in front of him, desperate to stop him, but he walks straight through me and sits at the bar next to her. It is unforgivable. The wandering eye. I can put up with it. The constant ignoring. I'll deal with it. Hell, I even forgave him last month, after he stabbed me 32 times and watched me bleed out. But this was too far. We are going to have a talk tonight. My mother thinks I'm too pretty. It's bittersweet to think about the damage that would do. Mother always said that while she stripped me to the waist and whipped me. I know in my heart she was preparing me for the horrors of my future. Men, she would say, they will be your downfall. The only way she saw to make me unattractive to those devils was to scar my skin. To keep them away, as she would say. When puberty hit, then came the potato peeler. The sharp sting of the blade as it cut my skin. Every stroke with the same utterance. When I grew taller than her, she took to my legs, scraping at them in long strokes, gouging out the flesh below the skin in deep canyons until they resemble the blooded bark of aged trees. Only on Halloween did my appearance not scare people. Only then would she let me out and not worry about the lushness of man. Last week, I reveled in the event. The house was decorated. The candy was placed in a bowl at the door, and I sat next to it. The kids loved the fresh grave in the yard. I think my mother would be proud that the man turned away from my visage. Well, if she could see them, that is. It's bittersweet to think about the damage that would do. I don't have a son. I don't have a son. That's what I told the cops when they came to my door asking about Sarah Sommers. Sure, we'd have done it back in college, but I ended it after she pranked me with an "I'm pregnant" joke. She told me pretty quickly that it was all for a laugh, but it made me realize that we did not want the same thing. She would have been happy to have a baby, while I knew that raising a kid would ruin my life. The cops told me that the DNA test proved that the kid was mine. That Sarah must have already been pregnant when I broke up with her. She just hadn't known it yet. They told me about the car accident, how her son had minor injuries, but she didn't survive. They told me that there was a bunch of legal stuff to be done, and as the birth father, I needed to be there. I just nodded in shock. I had a son. I didn't see how it was possible, but they seemed sure of it. But what do the cops know? They don't know that I was aware of Sarah's pregnancy after our breakup. They don't know that the stillborn she ended up having was not actually born still. Whatever it was imitating my dead child, I knew it was after me, wanting to spill my blood the way I spilled the baby's years ago. Unfortunately for it, I don't have a son. And I'm going to keep it that way.
The Limerick. There once was a man from Peru, who dreamed he was eating his shoe. He woke with a fright, in the middle of the night, when he felt something eating him too. The man from Peru screamed in pain, as the creature bit down once again, his sheets soaked in blood. He tried all he could, at an effort to flee made in vain. With his life force draining away, the man from Peru could not pray, his arms were no more than stumps of red gore, but what God could save him anyway? I'm afraid I cannot tell a lie, there's really no hope for this guy, but maybe for you. This rhyme will get through, you really should wake up and hide.
My teenage son won't stop sleeping in. My husband was murdered at work. He managed a gas station. When it was robbed, he cooperated, gave them all the money, and that monster still shot him. The only thing that kept me together was trying to care for our son, David. His father's murder was all over the news. David took it very hard. He was barely talking to anyone. He wouldn't eat. Mostly, he was sleeping. I'd go into his room at 3 in the afternoon, and he'd still be asleep. Before long I got him to a psychiatrist to get on some antidepressants. I prayed that once they were working, I'd have my smiling boy back. But he started sleeping more. Longer. Up to eat breakfast, then right back to sleep. He'd fight me when I tried to wake him up. David, you can't sleep all day. If you want to feel better, you have to get up, get some exercise. You don't understand. I need to sleep. David, please. Dad's there. Honey, we all have dreams. No, he's there. These aren't dreams. I can feel him. I remember everything. He wants me to be with him. We'll talk to Dr. Rossen and get your dosage adjusted. Now get up. I forced him to go on a walk with me. He didn't speak the whole time. That night, I warned him I was setting an alarm for the next morning. I wouldn't let him sleep in. He begrudgingly wished me good night. The next morning, he didn't wake up. I shook and shouted, but he was limp, pale. That's when I saw the empty bottle of antidepressants and a note. I want to live with Dad, so I've decided to sleep forever. Sorry, Mom. I kept thinking he would wake up. Even after the ambulance and police came, I kept waiting for the morgue to call to say he woke up. I laid in his bed and cried all night. The sun rose. I was so exhausted. I passed out. It was like I was in a Ghibli movie. Everything was so warm and inviting. I saw my husband and son playing catch with a football. When they saw me, they cheered and ran to me, hugging me and showering me with kisses. Are you staying, Mom? Something was wrong. My son I recognized. But the more I looked at my husband, the less familiar he looked. Something glowing behind his eyes. His smile was too yellow. I felt the hot breath when he whispered in my ear, "Your son is mine now." I awoke in a cold sweat. The sun was now setting. I ran to my room. I searched the boxes in my closet to find my husband's old .32 revolver, and ran back to my son's bed. Whatever that thing was, it had my son. I needed to save him. Time to go to sleep for the last time.
My wife may never fully recover from amnesia. A woman reported missing following a hit and run. The victim was struck by an unidentified car. Bystanders witnessed the woman hit her head on the sidewalk before wandering off prior to ambulance arrival. Presumed to have head trauma, and is likely disoriented and confused. Please contact the Jamestown Sheriff's Department if found. A black and white picture of Jane was neatly placed below the paragraph. You kept the article? Jane asked me with an inquisitive look on her face. Yes, it reminds me that life is too short. Reminds me how easily I almost lost you. That's such a sweet thing to say, honey. There was a period of time when I thought I'd lost Jane forever. When she went missing I searched for days. I probably only slept 2 hours a night. I found her laying on a bench in a park over an hour from the hospital. It was sheer luck. She was bloodied, bruised, and disheveled. It had been clear she had been wandering outside the whole time, utterly confused. It's me. Your husband. I've been worried sick. You hurt your head, that's how you ended up here, dear. She looked at me suspiciously, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get her to trust me. I convinced her to walk to the diner across the street, and I flipped through a couple of my favorite pictures of us. This is where we met, see? I saw some faint recognition in her eyes. She couldn't even tell me her name or where she lived, but the fact that she recognized me was enough. After she got cleaned up, I paid for a hotel until she came to trust me. I didn't want to push her boundaries. Eventually, she became comfortable, and we slowly adjusted to normal life again. It's been a year of progress, but Jane still has a hard time remembering. She wakes up screaming. Can't remember my name sometimes. Talks about people I've never heard of. It's like she forgets who she even was before all this. But, I love her with all my heart. Jane handed me back the paper, smiled, and walked off to the shower. I stared at her picture in the newspaper article again. Her beauty has never ceased to amaze me. In college, she never saw me as more than a friend, even though I was in love with her. I tried asking her out at least 5 times without success. I couldn't blame her, she was way out of my league. When I recognized Jane in the paper I knew life had given me a second chance. Fate brought me to her, and I wasn't going to lose her again. Convincing her was only half of it, I also had to tie up the loose ends. But luckily, a day after her accident, Jane's husband died in a freak house fire. Though there were only a few remains, Jane was presumed dead. After that, no one came looking for her. My wife won't let me rest. I couldn't sleep after my wife died. Every night I was tormented by visions of her final moments. I tried getting rid of her things. It felt nice seeing all those trash bags lined up by the curb. But removing the evidence of her presence didn't help. I saw her everywhere, and I still couldn't sleep at night. Maybe she wouldn't let me rest because she couldn't rest, my brain reasoned. Maybe there was something wrong with her resting place. I filled an oversized duffel bag with the parts still left in the freezer and dragged them into the woods behind our house. When I reached the top of the hill with the scenic overlook she liked, I dug a hole and buried them. Surely that will make her happy, I muttered to myself as I hiked down. I climbed into my bed that night at 9 p.m., excited to rest. But as soon as I closed my eyes I saw stained carpet and glassy eyes, not to mention the tufts of hair hanging on my hammer. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. How long can a person go without sleep, anyway? I had to move out. And I couldn't sell the place, who knows what an inspector might find. My mind played through different scenarios before settling on accidental fire. That would show her, a ghost with nowhere to haunt. The solution made me feel relieved. As I watched the flames climb higher and higher, I silently prayed for a fat insurance check. That night I checked into a room at a rundown highway motel. I couldn't have cared less about the flickering lights or the faint aroma of cigarettes. Not even the dingy sheets deterred me. Finally, I was going to get some sleep. A few minutes later I heard the key in the lock.
Hello, honey.
She said from the doorway. Her beautiful skin has soured into a sickly yellow, and a large nightcrawler dangled from her eye socket. As she pulled the sheets back and slipped in beside me, I noticed her fingernails were black and broken. Probably from clawing the soil. Didn't expect you here, I muttered. I guess the house hadn't meant much to her either. Please forgive us. I'll be executed for this, but I don't care, I need to warn people. We fucked up. Hubris. Our goddamned hubris. We tried to play God, we even celebrated when they first opened their eyes, and now. Jesus. Oh, sweet Jesus, please forgive us. To engineer the next great leap forward in human evolution was our task. 10 of the top minds of the day given a playground of scientific resources. No budgets, no expense reports, no ethical boundaries, no limits whatsoever. Just a quarterly progress report, an occasional demonstration, and a complete commitment to the project. And by complete, I mean complete. Every one of us is dead, at least legally speaking. Before we were even told what we signed on for, we had to agree to that. Our families don't even know we're alive. But, we were promised we'd be the authors of the greatest scientific achievement of the 21st century, and when we were done, we'd never need to work another day in our lives. God, what I wouldn't give to go back and say no. The problem is, we succeeded. We created life. An entirely new species, Homo futurus, our great achievement and our great failure. They're better equipped for survival than Homo sapiens in every conceivable way. Intelligence, it's beyond our comprehension, no tools exist that would allow us to accurately measure it. Size/strength, when mature, they're typically about 3.5 meters tall and can lift a sedan over their head. Vulnerabilities, none. Heat, cold, radiation, projectiles, explosives, illnesses, poisons. Nothing we tested bothered them in the slightest. They don't need food or water or air. Humans are fragile. Futuri, as we call them, are effectively invincible. Personality, none. Personalities and emotions are inefficiencies. Futuri are cold, calculating bastards. Every decision they make is simply based on what will propel their species forward faster. Reproduction, this was our greatest mistake. When you're stuck in a lab working on the same project for 17 years, everything becomes science. You forget the human experience, what it is to be alive, it all becomes numbers. Human mating is messy. It's inefficient, it takes too long to produce offspring, and too long for those offspring to reach maturity. So, we removed it. Futuri can reproduce asexually and reach full maturity in weeks, not years. There are no males or females, they can all make more. Basically, there will be as many of them as they decide. The age of Homo sapiens is over. We're an inefficiency. They see us as nothing more than a barrier to their progress, consuming resources that they could use for their gains. We thought they'd want to work with us on building a better future. But they just want to exterminate us. We've tried to reason with them, but everyone that's talked to them recently has committed suicide. They can toy with the human mind. And there are more of them every day. They'll break containment soon. This is my confession. I'm so sorry.
Please stop. He won't stop crying. I ask kindly, I beg, I scream, I try anything to make him leave, but he won't. He just stands in the corner, looking at me. Staring. I moved in last month. The rent is cheap, but so is the upkeep. I don't mind, it's a roof at the end of the day. I barely sleep anyway, particularly with him there. He first showed up a few days after. I thought I was going mad at first, phantom sobs from random corners of the apartment. I tapped the walls, not sure what I was expecting but hoping for something to happen, something that would explain the source of the noise. I then saw him. I was just watching some crappy cooking show, high as a kite, when I saw movement from the corner of my eye, like someone running. The room was dark, but I could just make out the silhouette of what appeared to be a small boy. He was crouched in the corner, head in his hands and sobbing uncontrollably. My heart was telling me to run, but something was forcing me to move towards him. As I got closer, he sharply looked up at me. His grey skin hung loosely on his face, his wet hair stubbornly stuck close to him, and his cloudy, glassy eyes were straight through me. "What the fuck?" I muttered, "that's impossible." I ran as fast as I could to the bathroom, fueled by terror. His body was still in the tub, looking beautiful and at peace, just like when I first saw him in the park. I sadly realized I couldn't keep him, I'd have to get rid of him. I tried my best with the smell, but it was becoming difficult for even me to ignore. Thankfully there was no one around that time of night, so getting him to my car was easy. Burning him, not so much. It was light by the time I got back to the apartment, and I passed out immediately. I was awoken just an hour later by his loud sobbing. It pierced my sleep and shocked me awake. Horrified, I saw him standing by my bed, crying and staring down at me. I haven't slept properly since. He's there. He's always there, even when I leave he follows like a shadow, the ball at the end of my chain. He started lashing out, breaking things. He made me bleed today, long and deep scratch marks etched with anger into my arms. He won't stop crying. I'm terrified of what will happen when he does.
The agony of a God, a father's heartbroken rage. My children never stopped disappointing me. I had such hope for them. They had so much potential when they were younger. But, again and again, they fail me. They fight each other over their petty differences, over fame, over belongings. Over such meaningless things. I remember the first of my children to betray me. He was always vain and arrogant. The moment his little brother was born, and he found out I was planning to have even more children, he rebelled against me. He told me my new children would turn against me. I really should have seen it coming then. I was so excited when they were born. I watched them grow up. I watched them learn. And then, I watched so many of them break my heart. I thought I'd at least be happy when one of my children wrote a famous book in my name. Until I found out that the book told lies. About how I wanted my daughters to be more submissive to my sons, and how all my gay and trans kids would end up in hell. That wasn't the first time I was used as an excuse for my children to do horrible things, saying that I told them to do it. They barely even call me anymore unless they want something from me. But I had so very many kids. Clearly, most of them would still be good. I decided that the ones who made me proud could spend the rest of their lives basking in my love. I'd give them whatever they wanted. And those who disappointed me would be cast out along with my first son. And he would do whatever he wanted with them. But, again and again, I found myself disgusted by their actions. I watched in horror as they destroyed themselves and each other because of greed, because of lust, because of hate, because of so many pathetic, small things. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, they wage war on each other. They enslave, kill, rape, and torture their own kind. They tell themselves they'll never do it again. They say they can change. But I've given them enough chances. I even sent their older brother to help them find redemption, and that didn't work. They hated him for the truths he showed them. He died to save them from their sins. Jesus, my boy, I'm so sorry. I never should have asked you to do this. Lucifer, I'm sorry for you too. I should have listened to you. You were always right. And, to the rest of my children, I'm done waiting for you to change. Your time is up. You've been sinning since Adam and Eve. I may have promised not to destroy your world with a flood, but I have so many other ways to bring your extinction. If you pray hard enough, one final time, I might decide to bother sorting you into heaven or hell instead of erasing your very souls. And I do mean pray. The Ghost of Murders Past, a detective's final redemption. It's rare that life gives you an opportunity to set things right. Coming out of retirement is rough. It's really rough when you're 75. The headlines have been coming in for the last month. The Claw Hammer Killer is back. It's been 30 years since the last murder. There have been 2 more. After the first one, I was sure they were wrong, but after the second one, the letters began coming into the police department. Same hand. Same tone. Same cadence. Whoever he is, he's clearly feeling like he has to keep the nightmare alive. I need to stop it this time. I looked at all my old scrapbooks. I relived everything from back in the day. All the near misses. All the horrific murders. All the families that never got peace. The new killings are bringing it back for them. I feel nothing but shame. I've been watching places for the last week. If he's following the pattern, it's going to happen soon. I sit in the car, waiting for a sign that I might recognize. I try to put myself into the mind of a killer. It's easier than I thought it would be. I don't like it, but it's something that has to be done. I finally get a hit. He's in his 50s, back at one of the old bars where the killer used to haunt. He's wearing the same kind of shoes. Same kind of jacket. He has to be precise. It's important to him. He's letting a woman in his car. I follow him. I need to be sure. He takes her out to the bluffs. I've had my lights off. He has no idea I'm behind him. After a few seconds, I put the blue and reds on him. Not authentic. Something I bought online, but in the dark. It looks real enough. I grab my gun. I yell at him to let her go. The door opens and the woman runs. I tell her to keep running. He gets out of the car and looks me up and down. You're not a cop. No. And you're not the Claw Hammer Killer. He looks at my face and it dawns on him. He's staring at the face of the man he's been copying. Idolizing. He smiles and tries to say something. I shoot his knees. The first time I've spilt blood since I've tried to live a better life. I grab his keys and mine and throw them away. He's going nowhere. He's going to pay for what he's done. I checked his car. He has all the appropriate tools. I have all my scrapbooks and trophies in my car. If you're reading this, you'll find me with a bullet in my head. You have your new killer. The old killer is dead. I don't ask forgiveness from the families because I deserve none. If God doesn't give me the forgiveness I'm asking for, then I am where I belong.
The nursery. The newlyweds were so excited about the baby. This was what they'd been waiting for their whole lives, to raise a family in their hometown, surrounded by a support staff of family and friends. Both sets of grandparents had already been over almost weekly, providing advice, tips, and tricks they learned along their own journey through parenthood. The couple's siblings had also been over the house frequently, showering them with gifts ranging from bassinets to baby bottles. They truly were set and ready to begin this new chapter of their lives. The nursery had everything for the baby: new crib, changing table, rocking chair, and quite possibly every stuffed animal in existence. You really couldn't ask for much more. The newlyweds loved every single detail of the room, until one night while the husband was away on business. On this dark and rainy evening, the crashing of the thunder woke the wife. Nervous being home alone during such a bad storm, she would pace around to keep herself distracted from her evening jitters. In her walks through the halls, she found herself ending up at the nursery. As she entered, she heard loud and piercing screams from the baby, a scream like she had never heard before. The wailing sound scared her so badly that she stumbled back in terror, falling through the nursery doorway and back into the hall. As she fell from the room, the screaming immediately stopped. She regained her footing and slowly walked back into the nursery, one leg at a time. As she entered, the screaming returned, shaking her to her core. What scared the wife most was not the sound of the scream, but the fact that it was coming from her abdomen, as the baby had yet to be born. The Pain of Neglect, a cautionary tale. First, I lost my hair. It was my fault. I didn't comb it on my own. It hurts my head and it makes me cry. I don't want it to hurt. Mommy said I had to comb all alone. She wouldn't help me. She is never home anymore. Ever since Daddy left, she just has no time. She said I needed to be a big girl. But I just didn't comb it. I thought I was very smart. But Mommy was right. If you don't take care of something, it leaves you. Just like Daddy did. One day, I woke up and all of my hair was on my pillow. I screamed and cried and tried to glue it back. But it didn't work. It wasn't all bad. The other girls laughed at me, but I didn't have to comb it anymore. There is only one thing I hated more than combing my hair. Cutting my fingernails. The scissor was too small and scary. Mommy said I needed to be a big girl. But I couldn't. I was too scared. So I let them grow. Yesterday, I woke up from a deep sleep. And they were on my pillow. All of them. That was all bad. My fingers were bleeding. I tried to pick my nails up, but touching stuff hurts now. It was my fault. I didn't take care of them. But after my nails left, everything was hard. I know I needed to brush my teeth. And I tried. But my fingers just hurt so bad, and I just couldn't. I went to bed crying. Mommy sat by my side. I was sad for my fingers, but happy she had time. She had made tea. I drank it and fell into a deep sleep. I woke up without teeth. It was my fault. So I just wanted to tell you to be big girls. Because it can really hurt if stuff goes away.